September 4, 1944, Antwerp, Belgium. Rain lashes across the cobblestone quays as British Sherman tanks grind over the Albert Canal Bridge. Smoke curls from the ruins of warehouses. The once bustling port of Antwerp, jewel of Northern Europe, now lies silent under the heavy boots of the British 11th Armoured Division. Colonel James "Jimmy" Johnson of the Royal Engineers steps off his half-track and surveys the devastation. Cranes lie twisted like skeletons along the docks. The Scheldt River smells of oil and scorched metal. Sunken barges choke the waterways, cranes are toppled, and German scuttling charges have ripped through the dock machinery. "Looks like the bloody end of the world," mutters Sergeant Wilkes, his voice swallowed by the rain. Johnson kneels beside a blown-out winch drum, runs a gloved hand over the splintered metal, and exhales through his teeth. "It will take months," he says quietly, almost to himself. But as he watches Canadian infantry file past, weary, mud-smeared, but victorious, he knows there is no time for pessimism. Behind them, Antwerp's clock towers still ring from the British artillery barrage that drove the last German defenders out just hours ago. The port, though technically captured intact, is crippled. The Germans, retreating in haste, sabotaged cranes, blew bridges, and mined the harbor approaches, and yet, within the Allied command tents a few miles away, new orders are already circulating. General Bernard Montgomery wants Antwerp operational, immediately. Eisenhower's supply lines stretch over 300 miles back to Normandy. The Red Ball Express convoys are exhausted. Every jerrycan of petrol burned to deliver another jerrycan forward threatens to strangle the advance into Germany. Without Antwerp, the Allied push into the Reich will starve. At Supreme Headquarters, Allied Expeditionary Force, SHAF, the message is blunt: restore Antwerp. At once. Colonel Johnson and his engineers understand what that means. The port's capacity, if restored, could feed the entire Allied front, delivering thousands of tons of ammunition, rations, and fuel daily. But the task borders on madness. The Germans didn't just wreck the docks, they still hold the Scheldt estuary, the narrow channel linking Antwerp to the North Sea. Until those coastal guns are silenced and the waterways cleared of mines, no ship can enter. The Allies may have the port, but the sea itself is still under German control. That night, as Johnson scribbles notes by candlelight in a commandeered warehouse office, he hears the low rumble of artillery far to the west. The Canadians are moving toward Walcheren Island, a fortress of concrete and flooded fields where German guns guard the estuary like a steel gate. He closes his notebook and looks out over the shattered docks. Rainwater glimmers in shell craters, reflecting the distant flashes of battle. If they can open the estuary, he whispers, we'll make this port breathe again. But no one yet believes it can be done, not in weeks. Not even in months, and yet, in less than 30 days, Antwerp will roar back to life, and stun even the most hardened German generals. October 2, 1944, Scheldt Estuary, Belgium and the Netherlands, the air reeks of salt, cordite, and mud. Canadian infantry wade chest-deep through flooded polders, rifles held high above the water. Overhead, RAF Typhoons roar low, their rockets screaming toward German strongpoints hidden among the dikes. Operation Vitality, the clearing of the Scheldt, is underway. General Guy Simons, commanding the Canadian 2nd Army Corps, has been handed an impossible mission: open the estuary so Antwerp can breathe again. The Germans, under Admiral Gunther Krank and General Gustav Adolf von Zangen, have turned the region into a nightmare of flooded farmlands, mined dikes, and fortified islands. To the north lies Walcheren Island, the key. Its heavy coastal batteries, each armed with 150mm and 200mm guns, command the river mouth. Every ship approaching Antwerp must pass beneath those guns. The island's defenders, remnants of the German 70th Infantry Division, have dug in, determined to hold the gateway to the Reich. For weeks, British and Canadian troops grind forward yard by yard through sodden terrain. Bulldozers are useless, every road is mined or underwater. Amphibious buffalo, tracked vehicles, lumbering steel boxes on treads, ferry men and supplies over the flooded lowlands. The cold wind off the North Sea cuts through their wet uniforms. In a command dugout near Breskens, Lieutenant John Harland of the Royal Canadian Engineers scribbles a report by lantern light. every bridge is down. Every lock gate blown. Germans have mined the canal banks. Progress measured in feet, not miles. Still, the advance continues. The men know why they fight. Antwerp is the key to ending the war before winter. Every day without that port costs the Allies thousands of tons of fuel and munitions, and gives the Wehrmacht precious time to regroup behind the Siegfried Line. By late October, the British 52nd, Lowland, Division prepares for the final assault on Walcheren. The RAF has bombed the island's dikes, deliberately flooding it to neutralize the German defenses. Entire villages vanish beneath the grey water. As dawn breaks on November 1, 1944, British commandos of No. 4 Brigade climb into their landing craft off the coast near Flushing. Rain lashes their faces as naval guns thunder from offshore destroyers. Remember, their commander shouts above the din, "We're not taking an island, we're taking the key to Europe." When the landing ramps crash down, chaos erupts. Machine guns rake the beaches. Men plunge into waist-deep water, stumbling toward the dike walls under tracer fire. But they climb. They climb because behind them lies the dream of an open port, of an Allied army that can finally surge across the Rhine. By nightfall, the Union Jack flies over Flushing. 2 days later, the last German defenders on Walcheren surrender. The Scheldt, bloodied, battered, and littered with wreckage, is finally opened. In Antwerp, Colonel Johnson receives the message by radio: Scheldt cleared. Channel open. Begin restoration. He looks up from his map table, eyes wide. The port, his port, can now come alive, but as he steps outside, the challenge looms before him in brutal clarity. The docks are still ruins. The cranes are still dead. The lock gates are still blasted apart. And the first Allied convoys are already forming offshore, waiting to unload. The clock is ticking. Johnson calls his officers together in the shattered harbor office. "Gentlemen," he says, his voice hard but steady, "they say it'll take 3 months. We'll do it in 1." Silence. Then, faint smiles. They know it's madness. But after what the Canadians endured at Walcheren, failure isn't an option. November 5, 1944, Antwerp docks. The morning fog hangs thick over the Scheldt as Colonel James Johnson and his engineers begin what everyone calls the impossible month. The air smells of salt, diesel, and burnt wood. The sound of hammers, welding torches, and shouting echoes across the water, the heartbeat of a city struggling to rise again. The Royal Engineers, joined by American and Belgian dockworkers, swarm over the ruined quays. Many of the cranes are wrecked beyond recognition, others are tilted precariously into the water. Every inch of the harbor is littered with twisted metal, half-sunk barges, and unexploded ordnance. Corporal Wilkes kneels beside a corroded mine lodged in the silt, muttering, "One wrong move and we're all fish bait." Johnson doesn't look up. "Then make the right move," he says, "time is their enemy." Eisenhower's front lines have outrun their supplies, tanks idle for lack of fuel, artillery rationed shells, and men go hungry as autumn turns to freezing mud. The Allies need Antwerp now, not in spring. The operation unfolds with military precision and improvisation in equal measure. British Army engineers work side by side with the U.S. Navy Seabees, the Royal Navy's bomb disposal units, and Dutch civilian divers who know the harbor's every tide. Within days, a plan emerges. The Americans will focus on clearing the main access channel, the British will restore dockside infrastructure, and the Belgians, many of them veterans of the pre-war port, will rebuild the cranes. In one section of the harbor, giant, floating sheer legs, mobile cranes mounted on barges, haul sunken ships from the mud. The cranes groan and strain as the carcass of a German coaster rises from the depths, dripping black sludge. It takes an entire day just to clear one berth. By mid-November, they've restored power to the first quay. Floodlights blaze for the first time in months, casting long shadows over the ruined warehouses. Workers cheer. For a brief moment, it feels like victory, but danger remains ever present. On the night of November 12, Luftwaffe bombers sweep in low over the river, dropping parachute mines into the channel. The explosions ripple through the port, shattering windows and undoing days of progress. Johnson and his men dive for cover as a warehouse erupts in flame. "Get the hoses. Keep the pumps running," he bellows, his voice hoarse through the smoke. By dawn, the fires are out, and work resumes as if nothing happened. The Germans cannot believe it. Intercepted Wehrmacht radio reports from General von Zangen's headquarters describe an insane tempo of reconstruction and the Allies' disregard for exhaustion. One captured German officer later admitted, "We thought Antwerp would be useless for the rest of the year." Yet within weeks, they had ships unloading there. It was beyond comprehension. By November 25, 1944, the engineers gather at the dock's edge as the first Allied convoy approaches, a line of Liberty ships heavy with fuel, ammunition, and food. Johnson stands beside a group of Belgian dockworkers, his uniform blackened with grease and coal dust. The ship's horn blares as it enters the harbor, a deep, triumphant sound that rolls across the river like thunder. "Sir," Wilkes murmurs, "she made it. She bloody made it." The ship, SS Sam Hope, glides into her berth. Tugboats nudge her alongside the rebuilt quay. Dock cranes, now repaired and creaking back to life, swing into motion, and then, for the first time since the war began, the port of Antwerp lives again. The men cheer. Some cry. Others just stand in silence, staring as the cargo nets rise, heavy with crates marked U.S. Army, rations, Type C. From that moment onward, Antwerp becomes the lifeline of the Western Front, the artery through which the final push into Germany will flow. Within days, hundreds of ships follow. Over 10,000 tons of supplies are unloaded daily. Ammunition, fuel, winter clothing, all pouring across the docks and straight to the armies driving toward the Rhine. But the Germans aren't done yet. High command in Berlin knows what Antwerp means, and they are preparing to strike back, hard. December 16, 1944, Antwerp, Belgium. The first sirens wail just after dawn. A cold wind sweeps through the port as men look up from their work and see silver streaks cutting across the winter sky. Then comes the sound, that unnatural, rising growl that makes the stomach twist. V2S, someone shouts. A second later, the earth erupts. A thunderclap rolls across the city. Windows shatter, cranes topple, the sky fills with dust and screams. Antwerp, now the Allies' busiest port, has become Hitler's prime target. From launching sites in the occupied Netherlands, German forces unleash a storm of vengeance, V-1 flying bombs and the terrifying supersonic V-2 rockets. They come without warning, no engine whine, no siren, just a blinding flash and devastation. In the weeks following the port's reopening, more than 600 V-2 rockets and nearly 2,000 V-1s fall on Antwerp. The attacks are relentless. Warehouses vanish overnight, entire dock crews are wiped out, yet the work never stops. Colonel Johnson, his face gray with fatigue, stands amid the rubble of Pier 218 as rescue teams dig through debris. "Get those lines cleared," he orders quietly. "We've ships due in 6 hours." "Sir, this quay's a crater," Wilkes says, gesturing to the smoking ruins. Johnson looks at him, eyes red but unyielding. "Then build around it." By now, Antwerp has become the most bombed city in Western Europe, surpassing even London's Blitz rate. But the Allies can't afford to lose it. Eisenhower calls it the single most important port on the continent. Every convoy that docks in Antwerp feeds not just the front lines but the entire Allied advance. The U.S. 1st and 9th Armies depend on its flow. To protect the port, the British launch Operation Antwerp X, the largest integrated anti-aircraft defense ever constructed. Over 500 heavy guns, 300 light Bofors cannons, and radar-guided searchlights ring the city. U.S. anti-aircraft batteries from the 50th AAA Brigade join in, creating what soldiers call the steel umbrella. Night after night, the sky above Antwerp becomes a firestorm of tracers and flak bursts. Gunners work until their barrels glow red. Civilians huddle in basements, whispering prayers beneath the thunder. Still, the rockets fall. On December 27, a V-2 strikes the Rex Cinema in the city center, killing 567 civilians, one of the deadliest single attacks of the war. For a moment, even Johnson falters. He walks through the ruined streets that night, the sound of sirens echoing off the broken buildings. How much longer can we take this? He asks no one in particular. A Belgian dock foreman, a wiry man named Henri Claes, puts a soot-stained hand on his shoulder. As long as it takes, Colonel, he says. We've waited 4 years for this. We're not giving it back. The next morning, the cranes are running again. The ships keep coming, even as German forces launch their desperate Ardennes offensive. The Battle of the Bulge, Antwerp continues to feed the Allied armies. The supplies unloaded there sustain the defense at Bastogne and fuel the counterattack that finally shatters Hitler's last gamble. By January 1945, despite weeks of bombardment, the port is operating at near full capacity. Over 900,000 tons of cargo move through Antwerp that month alone. When German intelligence finally reports this to OKW headquarters in Berlin, a stunned silence follows. General Alfred Jodl, chief of operations, is said to have muttered, "If they can rebuild Antwerp under our rockets, then we have already lost the war." He was right. The miracle of Antwerp, built from ruins, sustained under fire, and defended with steel and courage, had turned the tide of logistics, and with it, the war itself. In the spring of 1945, as Allied armor poured across the Rhine and into Germany, every bullet, every shell, every gallon of fuel traced its lineage back to that port, and to the men and women who refused to let it die. March 1945, Antwerp, Belgium. The bitter winter is finally breaking. Thin sunlight glints off the Scheldt River as columns of cargo trucks rumble eastward, carrying the lifeblood of the Allied advance. From above, the port of Antwerp looks like an enormous, beating heart, cranes pivoting, ships gliding in and out, rails clattering as freight cars vanish toward the German border. Colonel James Johnson leans against a railing overlooking the main quay, cigarette smoke curling through the cold air. Below, Belgian dockworkers in patched uniforms unload crates stamped U.S. Army, Ordnance Depot, Rhine Offensive. Somewhere out there, beyond Cologne, beyond the Ruhr, the final battle for Germany has begun. 4 months ago, this place was a ruin. Now it is the single greatest logistical hub in the world. Over 40 ships arrive each week, unloading hundreds of thousands of tons of supplies. Ammunition, rations, fuel, field hospitals, even tanks, all flow through Antwerp's arteries and toward the front. Every clanking winch and whistle echoes with determination. General Eisenhower himself visits the port in early March, his convoy weaving past stacks of crates and oil drums that stretch as far as the eye can see. Johnson salutes as the Supreme Commander steps from his jeep, his familiar pipe clenched between his teeth. Eisenhower surveys the scene for a long moment before speaking. "Colonel, I was told it couldn't be done. And yet, here we are." Johnson's answer is quiet but firm. "Sir, it wasn't done by me. It was done by everyone who refused to stop." The general smiles faintly. "Then that's why we're going to win." As Eisenhower departs, Johnson looks back toward the city, the bomb scars, the patched cranes, the weary men still at work. He realizes Antwerp isn't just a victory of engineering, it's a victory of will. The German High Command knows it too. Intelligence intercepts reveal their disbelief, not only that the Allies restored the port in record time, but that it continues to function flawlessly despite months of rocket attacks. One report from the OKW Logistics Office reads simply, "Enemy port Antwerp fully operational. Estimate, unstoppable." By April, the stream of supplies becomes a flood. Allied forces smash through the Ruhr, liberate the Netherlands, and press toward the Elbe. Everywhere, soldiers remark on the sudden abundance, food, ammunition, fuel, a stark contrast to the desperate shortages of the previous autumn. They may not know it, but much of it came from the miracle at Antwerp. On May 8, 1945, when Germany finally surrenders, the bells of Antwerp ring out once again. The same towers that had watched the city burn now echo with celebration. Ships in the harbor blast their horns, workers throw their caps into the air. Colonel Johnson stands at the dockside as fireworks bloom faintly over the rooftops. Beside him, Sergeant Wilkes hands him a battered steel helmet, dented, scuffed, its khaki paint worn to bare metal. Figured you might want a souvenir, sir, Wilkes says. Johnson smiles. Keep it, Sergeant. You earned it. The two men watch in silence as another convoy departs upriver, this time not for war, but for rebuilding Europe. Antwerp, the city that refused to die, has become the foundation for peace. In the months that follow, Allied command issues a detailed report on the port's restoration. One line stands out above all others: the rapid rehabilitation of Antwerp ranks among the most remarkable engineering and logistical achievements of the Second World War. Historians would later agree. The speed and scale of its resurrection shortened the war by months, perhaps more. Without Antwerp, the Allied advance might have stalled in the mud of Belgium. With it, the road to Berlin became inevitable, and though the guns would fall silent, the echoes of that effort, the clanging cranes, the courage under fire, the defiance in the face of ruin, would never fade, because in the winter of 1944, when the world expected collapse, a port reborn on the Scheldt River proved something greater than strategy or firepower, that the human will to rebuild is stronger than the will to destroy.